My name is Sarah Martin. My father was a physician here, came in the 30s before the lake came up, and continued to practice to 1965, 66. The city hospital followed what was known as the Tennessee Valley Infirmary. This building was started in 1938 or thereabouts. They bought this piece of property, the city hospital, and it didn't open until October of 1941. Originally this was listed as a 4-story structure with 1 story being underground. The 3rd floor, though, was not opened until August of 1948. The way the hospital was built was with the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, provided the majority of the funds. And that wound up being about $100,000 from the federal government, and then the city contributed anywhere from $51,000 to $54,000. In the lower area, which was below ground, the only ventilation you could have were through windows, but it was below ground, so they built these well areas that looked to be, 4 feet wide and run the whole length of the front of the hospital, and that's how they got air to the basement where the laundry was done. The patients were down there, and then where you had a lot of storage. On the east wing of the 1st floor, where the emergency room was, the x-ray, and a laboratory. There was no full-time emergency room doctor probably till the early 60s. Each doctor would cover their own patients. They would get called in. And it was a real novelty when they were able to have assigned emergency room doctors to cover that. The ambulance entrance was interesting to do because when an ambulance was coming to the hospital, everybody in town knew it, so therefore you would have a gathering of people to see what was happening. And on many occasions, people in the crowd were called forth to help unload the ambulances. There was no kitchen area, so living next door, my mother wound up being the cook to deliver the food to the hospital for the patients and for the nurses. The 2nd floor had the operating room, which was on the left. From the outside, you can identify it by the 3 large glass windows side by side that provided a lot of lighting. There's stone steps that go up to the adjacent property where you can look right into the 2nd floor through the big windows. And you could see the big bright light when they turned it on. All the staff would gather around the table, and we couldn't see what was going on, but we certainly made up a lot of interesting things. And that was for all the neighborhood kids to do. Also on the 2nd floor is the nursery. The labor and delivery room was right across from the operating room, and then right behind the nurse's station on the 2nd floor was the viewing window for the nursery, which is a sizable window, and it's still there today. And a lot of people come by to see where they first entered the world and had an audience. An interesting story about when the hospital was opened, the grand opening was postponed for 4 or 5 days, but the Tennessee Infirmary closed on time, so it left with no coverage for anyone that was really sick. Dr. Benning was a physician in town who did a lot of deliveries and had a patient that went into hard labor and needed medical care. So Dr. Couch, who was also the mayor of town, was approached, and he told them to open a room in the hospital for the delivery of the first baby. Then 9 more patients were added before the hospital was ever opened. So we had 10 patients in a hospital that wasn't open, and we had closed an infirmary that only had 8 beds, so it was a win-win. In the 1960s, the Marshall County Hospital Board offered to build a larger hospital in Guntersville, and this hospital was landlocked. There was no way to expand it. The walls are poured concrete. It is solid as a rock. There was a lot of anxiety in closing the hospital, and for a time, even after the new one was built, this hospital was kept open. The new hospital was built, and it opened in 1963. This one closed probably in 1964 or 65, and then all the doctors were under one roof out there. And I don't remember when. This is in the area where Regions Bank is located. It certainly didn't stand as long as this hospital that was built in 1939 or 38 because it has already been replaced by the Regions Bank. But that's part of the history of the City Hospital of Guntersville.